His words hung in the frozen air between us, sharp and crystalline like the icicles forming outside our bedroom window. "Don't ever come back here," Nathan said, his voice terrifyingly calm despite the vein pulsing at his temple. "I mean it, Mackenzie. We're done." I stood motionless in our bedroom doorway, still wearing the black cocktail dress from the firm's holiday party, my coat draped over my arm. The distance between us, 10 feet of expensive hardwood flooring, felt impossibly vast. In the 7 years we'd been married, I'd seen Nathan angry, disappointed, even cruel, but never like this. Never with this cold finality. "You don't mean that," I whispered, but even as the words left my lips, I knew he did. His jaw tightened as he turned away from me, methodically removing his watch, the vintage Rolex I'd saved for months to buy him on our first anniversary. I've never meant anything more in my life. Outside, snow had begun falling, transforming Chicago into a deceptive wonderland that masked the city's sharp edges. A gust of wind rattled our bedroom window, and I flinched at the sound. I should have screamed. Should have fought. Should have demanded explanations. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow calm settle over me, as if I were watching the scene unfold from somewhere above. "Fine," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I'll be gone within the hour." Nathan didn't respond. Didn't even look at me as I turned away. The soft click of the bedroom door closing behind me sounded unnervingly like finality. 90 minutes later, I stood on the curb outside our brownstone with 2 hastily packed suitcases at my feet. The snow fell heavier now, melting against my hot cheeks. 7 years of marriage reduced to whatever I could grab in an hour. My wedding ring sat on the kitchen counter beside a note containing only 2 words. "Goodbye? Then." As I climbed into the Uber that would take me to Mia's apartment, I didn't look back at the warm glow of our bedroom window. I was already gone. 16 months earlier. "I still think you should go with the Amsale," Mia said. Sprawled across the chaise in the bridal boutique's VIP room, champagne flute dangling from her fingers, I emerged from behind the silk curtain in wedding gown number 5. A Vera Wang creation that cost more than my first car. "Nathan thinks I should wear something more traditional." Mia rolled her eyes, subtle enough that I could pretend not to notice. "Remind me again why Nathan gets a vote on your wedding dress? Because he's the groom?" I laughed, turning to examine the back of the dress in the 3-way mirror. "Because he's controlling," Mia muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Before I could respond, she sat up straighter and softened her voice. "Mac, you know I adore you, which is why I have to ask, are you sure about this?" "About him?" I stilled, my hands hovering over the delicate pearl buttons trailing down the back of the gown. In the mirror, I caught a flash of something in my own eyes. Hesitation, perhaps. I blinked it away. Of course I'm sure. "I love him," I said, the familiar words automatic on my tongue. Mia set down her champagne and crossed the room to stand behind me. Our eyes met in the mirror. Loving someone isn't always enough of a reason to marry them. "He loves me too," I added, my voice smaller than I intended. "I know he does, sweetie." "In his way." She squeezed my shoulders gently. "But sometimes the way a person loves you can be like being loved by a hurricane. Powerful, yes, but also destructive." I turned to face her, something defensive rising in me. "That's not fair." Nathan's ambitious and passionate. He knows what he wants, including exactly what his bride should wear. Apparently. He has good taste. He has opinions, Mia corrected, about everything from the wine you drink to the friends you keep. A flush crept up my neck. "What's that supposed to mean?" Mia sighed, taking my hands in hers. "You've canceled plans with me 3 times this month because Nathan suddenly needed you for something. You stopped painting. You barely see your brother anymore. You changed your hair because Nathan mentioned once that he preferred it lighter. That's not—" "Yes, it is," she said firmly, but not unkindly. "The Mackenzie I've known since college was stubborn and brave and did whatever the hell she wanted. That girl wouldn't let a man, any man, make her smaller." I pulled my hands away, turning back to the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked like a stranger, Hair several shades blonder than my natural color, body thinner than it had been a year ago, eyes uncertain. "You don't understand," I said finally. "Nathan challenges me to be better. He has high standards because he believes in me." Mia's reflection watched me sadly. There's a difference between supporting someone to grow and controlling them to change. The boutique attendant chose that moment to sweep in, cooing over the dress and effectively ending our conversation. But later, as I changed back into my street clothes, Mia's words echoed in my head, like being loved by a hurricane. I pushed the thought away. Nathan loved me. He'd chosen me. And in 2 months, I'd be Mrs. Nathan Blackwood, just as I'd dreamed since the day we met at that gallery opening 3 years ago. The dress I ultimately purchased was the one Nathan had shown me in a magazine weeks earlier. 10 months earlier. First time Nathan's hand closed around my wrist hard enough to leave marks. We were 6 months into our marriage. We'd been at a dinner with his colleagues from the architectural firm, the type of event Nathan excelled at, and I endured. 4 courses of networking disguised as socializing, where every conversation felt like a chess match I hadn't learned the rules for. "You were flirting with James all night," Nathan said as soon as our front door closed behind us, his voice deadly quiet. I froze in the act of removing my earrings. "What?" "No, I wasn't. I saw you laughing at his jokes, touching his arm." He stalked toward me, loosening his tie with precise movements. "My own wife making me look like a fool in front of the entire firm. Nathan, that's ridiculous. James is your mentor. He's 65 and happily married. We were just talking about his granddaughter's art program." His hand shot out, fingers circling my wrist and squeezing until I gasped. "Don't lie to me, Mackenzie. Don't you ever lie to me." For a moment, we stood frozen in our foyer, the only sound our uneven breathing. Then, as quickly as he'd grabbed me, he let go, horror washing over his features. "Mac, His voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me." I rubbed my wrist, already seeing the shadow of fingerprints forming. "You hurt me." He crumpled then, dropping to his knees in front of me, arms wrapping around my waist as he pressed his face against my stomach. I know. Please forgive me. It's just, work has been so stressful, and when I saw you with him, A sob escaped him. "I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. I should have walked out then. Should have recognized the manipulation in his tears, the way he'd twisted his violence into a twisted form of devotion. Instead, I found myself stroking his hair. "It's okay," I whispered, though it wasn't. "I'm not going anywhere." The next day, a massive bouquet of white roses arrived at my office with a note. "I don't deserve you. Thank you for loving me despite my flaws." And that night he ran a bath for me, complete with candles and expensive bath oils. As he tenderly washed my hair, his fingers tracing the bruises on my wrist with regret, he promised it would never happen again. I believed him. It was the first of many promises he would break. 6 months earlier. "I thought we agreed you'd quit that job," Nathan said, not looking up from his laptop as I walked through the door. I set my portfolio case by the entry table, exhaustion seeping through my bones. I'd spent the day at the Art Institute, painstakingly restoring a damaged O'Keeffe. It had been meticulous, challenging work, the kind that once filled me with purpose. We discussed it. I corrected carefully. I said I'd think about it. Nathan's typing paused. He closed the laptop with deliberate slowness. And I love my work. I tried to keep my voice light, casual. The Art Institute just offered me the lead position on the Modernist collection restoration. It's a huge opportunity. We don't need the money, Mackenzie. His voice was reasonable, patient, as if explaining something to a child. And I need you here, available, present. It's not about the money. Then what? Status, recognition? His laugh held no humor. I thought you'd outgrown that need for validation from strangers. I moved to the kitchen, needing distance, needing space to breathe. It's about doing something I love. Something that's mine. Nathan followed, leaning against the doorframe as I poured myself a glass of water. Is this marriage not enough for you? Am I not enough? The guilt rose, automatic and suffocating. Of course you are. That's not what I meant. Then explain it to me. His voice softened, reasonable again. Help me understand why my wife needs to exhaust herself for a job when I can provide everything she needs. Because when I'm bent over a canvas, I remember who I am. Because in that conservation lab, I'm valued for my skills, not my obedience. Because every time I restore something broken, I feel less broken myself. But I said none of that. Instead, I set down my water glass and crossed to him, sliding my arms around his waist in practiced submission. You're right, I said, the words like ash in my mouth. The hours are too long anyway. I'll give notice tomorrow. His smile was radiant as he kissed my forehead. You'll see, Mac. This is for the best. You've been so stressed lately. Now you'll have time to focus on us, on making our house a home. That night, as Nathan slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember when I'd started measuring my words so carefully, weighing each syllable for potential offense. When had I started filtering my thoughts, my desires, my very self through the lens of Nathan's approval? Like being loved by a hurricane. Mia's words from our wedding dress shopping suddenly resurfaced. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since the argument after I'd canceled our weekend trip to her lake house because Nathan had, unexpectedly, planned a client dinner that required my presence. He's isolating you. Mac, she'd said over the phone, not bothering to hide her frustration. It's textbook control. You're being dramatic, I'd responded. He just values our time together. And what about what you value? What about the people who've loved you longer than he has? I hadn't had an answer for that. We hadn't spoken since. In the darkness of our bedroom, I turned to look at Nathan's sleeping profile. The strong jaw, the perfect nose, the long eyelashes resting against his cheeks. He was beautiful. He was successful. He had chosen me, so why did I feel like I was disappearing? 3 months earlier, I found the first email by accident. Nathan had asked me to send some files from his home office computer while he was at a conference in Boston. As I searched for the document, a notification popped up in the corner of the screen. New message from Vanessa Harlow. I shouldn't have clicked it. Some part of me knew that even as my finger moved to the trackpad, even as the email loaded on the screen, last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you, about us. How long until you end this charade and we can be together openly? The room tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of Nathan's desk to steady myself, reading the message again, then again. Below it, I could see the thread of previous exchanges, dozens of them stretching back months. I clicked, scrolled, read with increasing numbness. I hate that she's still in our house. You deserve better than her. When will you tell her? And Nathan's replies, soon, I promise. She's emotionally fragile. I need to handle this carefully. The timing isn't right. My husband and Vanessa Harlow, his new junior associate, the one he'd insisted on hiring personally 6 months ago, the one he'd mentioned with casual dismissiveness whenever I asked about the firm's newest team member. Competent enough, I suppose, though a bit desperate for approval. I closed the email, hands shaking so badly I misclicked 3 times. Then I opened his browser history, his photo gallery, his cloud storage. In my frantic state, I wasn't even sure what I was looking for until I found it. A folder labeled Blackwood Tower Project. Inside were financial records, investor communications, project specifications, all for a development I'd never heard Nathan mention. The largest architectural project of his career, apparently, with tens of millions in investment funds already secured. Funds that, according to the spreadsheets I found, had been partially diverted into a separate account. An offshore account in Nathan's name alone. My husband was embezzling from his investors, from his own firm, and planning his exit from the country, from his marriage, from his entire life, with Vanessa Harlow. I sat in his office chair for hours, reading everything, downloading copies to a secure cloud storage in my name, not crying, not screaming, just methodically gathering evidence of my husband's betrayal in every possible form. When I finally stood, my legs numb from sitting so long, a strange calm had settled over me. Nathan had taken so much from me, my confidence, my career, my friendships, my sense of self. But in giving me access to his computer, he'd unknowingly handed me something powerful, the truth, and the means to destroy him with it. I sent the files he'd asked for, closed everything else, and cleared the browser history. Then I called Mia for the first time in nearly a year. "I need help," I said when she answered, no preamble necessary, "and I think I'm finally ready to listen." The night of the holiday party. "You look beautiful," Nathan said, adjusting his cufflinks as I emerged from our closet in the black Dior dress he'd selected for the occasion. "Every man at the party will be jealous." I smiled, the expression practiced and hollow. "Thank you." In the 2 months since discovering his affair and financial crimes, I'd played the role of devoted wife with Oscar-worthy precision. I'd agreed with his opinions, laughed at his jokes, prepared his favorite meals. I'd even started talking about wanting to start a family soon, watching his barely concealed panic with grim satisfaction. Meanwhile, I'd been executing my exit strategy with Mia's help. A new bank account in my maiden name. A sublease on a small apartment on the north side. A quiet meeting with his firm's ethics counsel, providing copies of the incriminating financial records without revealing my source. Tonight was the firm's holiday party. Tonight was also when the ethics committee had scheduled their emergency meeting to review the evidence. By tomorrow morning, Nathan's world would begin to unravel. I just needed to get through this one last evening of pretense. The party was held at the Peninsula Hotel, the architectural firm having rented out the ballroom for their annual celebration. Nathan kept his arm around my waist possessively as we worked the room, his charm on full display. I sipped champagne and smiled at his colleagues, playing my part while silently counting down the hours. Then I saw her. Vanessa Harlow, in a red dress that left little to the imagination, watching Nathan from across the room with barely concealed hunger. Our eyes met briefly. I smiled, raised my glass in acknowledgement. The confusion on her face almost made me laugh. "I need to use the restroom," I murmured to Nathan, who nodded absently, already deep in conversation with a potential client. In the elegant marble bathroom, I was washing my hands when the door opened and Vanessa walked in. She hesitated when she saw me, then squared her shoulders and approached the mirror beside me. "Mrs. Blackwood," she said, her voice artificially pleasant as she pretended to fix her already perfect lipstick. "Vanessa." I dried my hands slowly. "Beautiful party, isn't it?" "Yes," she glanced at me uncertainly. "The firm always does it right." I adjusted my wedding ring, making sure the diamonds caught the light. "Nathan tells me you've been doing exceptional work on the Blackwood Tower project." She froze, lipstick halfway to her mouth. "He mentioned that to you?" "Of course," I smiled serenely. "My husband shares everything with me. His triumphs, his challenges, his plans." The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're—" "Did he tell you he was planning to leave me?" I asked, my voice gentle, almost sympathetic. "That you'd run away together once the project was complete? Once the money was safely transferred?" Her mouth opened, closed. "That's not—" "It's all right, Vanessa. You're not the first woman Nathan has made promises to." I reached out and straightened the strap of her dress with sisterly familiarity, though you might want to ask him about Rebecca from the Boston office, or Diane from his graduate program. "Nathan has a pattern." I stepped back, pleased to see her perfectly composed facade cracking. "Enjoy the rest of the party," I said, moving toward the door. "Oh, and if I were you, I'd check the status of those offshore transfers. You might find some irregularities." I left her standing there, staring after me with dawning horror. By the time I returned to Nathan's side, my decision was made. I wouldn't wait for tomorrow's fallout. I would leave tonight on my terms before he realized his carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. When we arrived home hours later, I wasn't surprised to find him seething with barely controlled rage. Vanessa must have said something, or perhaps he'd received a warning about the ethics committee meeting. Either way, the mask of loving husband had slipped, revealing the cold, calculating man beneath. "Did you have a good time tonight?" he asked as we entered the bedroom, his voice deceptively casual. "It was lovely," I replied, removing my earrings at the vanity. "Your speech was impressive." He watched me in the mirror, eyes narrowed. "You seemed deep in conversation with James again." I almost laughed at the familiar accusation, his go-to method of deflection. "Just catching up. His granddaughter's starting at RISD next fall." "And Vanessa? What did you talk about with her in the bathroom?" I turned slowly to face him. "What makes you think we talked about anything significant?" "She seemed upset afterward, did she?" I asked innocently. "Perhaps she's under stress. The Blackwood Tower project must be quite demanding." His expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. "You know about the project?" "Of course, darling. It's going to establish you as one of the premier architects in the country." I smiled, though I imagine the ethics committee might have some questions about the financial structures. The blood drained from his face. "What have you done?" "Nothing yet," I said truthfully. "Just ensured that when I do leave you, I won't walk away empty-handed." His composure shattered then, the careful facade of control falling away entirely. "You're not leaving me, ever, do you understand?" I stood, gathering my dignity around me like armor. "Actually, Nathan, I am. Tonight." What followed was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. His initial denials, his attempts to gaslight me, to make me doubt what I'd discovered. Then when those failed, the threats, financial ruin, legal action, the promise that no one would believe my delusions over his sterling reputation. And finally, when he realized I wasn't backing down, the cold fury that led to those final words. "Don't ever come back here," he'd said. "I mean it, Mackenzie. We're done," as if it had been his decision all along. 6 months later, the legal proceedings dragged on for months. Nathan was facing both criminal charges for financial fraud and a contentious divorce in which he fought for every penny, every possession, as if winning the battle might somehow salvage his crumbling reputation. I moved into the North Side apartment, reconnected with Mia and other friends Nathan had systematically pushed out of my life, and eventually found a new position at a small private gallery specializing in restoration work. It wasn't easy. There were nights I woke up gasping from nightmares where I was still trapped in that beautiful brownstone, slowly disappearing. Days when I second-guessed every decision, heard Nathan's critical voice in my head dissecting my choices. But there were good days, too. Days when I painted again, rediscovering the joy of creating without judgment. Evenings with Mia and other friends laughing freely for the first time in years. Mornings when I woke up and realized I didn't have to calculate my words, my actions, my very existence around another person's volatile moods. Today was one of those good days. The divorce had finally been settled, largely in my favor thanks to the evidence I'd gathered of Nathan's financial misconduct. I'd received notification that morning that the last of the paperwork had been processed. I was legally, officially Mackenzie Hayes again, no longer bound to the Blackwood name or the man who bore it. To celebrate, Mia had insisted on taking me to dinner at a new restaurant in River North. "Wear something fabulous," she'd instructed. "This is your Independence Day." I chose a deep green dress I'd bought the previous week, a color Nathan had always claimed washed me out, but that made my eyes look like emeralds. My hair had grown out, returning to its natural chestnut shade. As I arrived at the restaurant, snow had just begun to fall, delicate flakes that dissolved on the warm sidewalk. For a moment, I paused, remembering another snowy night when I'd stood outside our brownstone with 2 hastily packed suitcases and the shattered remains of a life I'd thought was perfect. "Ma'am?" The valet interrupted my thoughts. "Would you like me to take your car?" I smiled, handing him my keys. "Yes, please." Inside, the restaurant was warm and inviting, with exposed brick walls and soft lighting that cast everything in a gentle glow. I spotted Mia at a corner table, waving enthusiastically. "You look amazing," she said as I sat down. "Freedom suits you." "It feels strange," I admitted. Good strange, but still. I spent so long being someone else's idea of myself. She raised her wine glass. To finding Mackenzie Hayes again. The real one. The stubborn, brilliant, brave one who never needed anyone's approval to begin with. I clinked my glass against hers, emotion tightening my throat. To found things. We ordered, falling into the easy conversation of old friends who've weathered storms together. Halfway through our appetizers, Mia's expression suddenly changed, her eyes fixed on a point beyond my shoulder. "Mac," she said quietly. "Don't turn around," but Nathan just walked in. My hand froze midair, wine glass halfway to my lips. "What, here?" She nodded slightly. "With some blonde. Corporate type. Not Vanessa." I should have been anxious, angry, afraid. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. "Is he coming this way?" "No, they're being seated across the room. But he'll definitely see you if you turn around." I considered my options. We could leave, find another restaurant. I could hide, shrink myself again to avoid confrontation. Instead, I set down my wine glass and stood. "Excuse me for a moment." "Mac," Mia hissed, alarmed. "What are you doing?" Something I should have done a long time ago. I crossed the restaurant with measured steps, aware of conversations quieting as I passed. Nathan sat with his back to me, his dinner companion facing in my direction. She noticed me first, her eyes widening slightly as I approached. Nathan turned, and for a moment, we simply looked at each other. He'd lost weight, dark circles under his eyes betraying the toll of the legal battles. The sight of me seemed to physically startle him, as if he'd seen a ghost. "Mackenzie," he recovered quickly, smoothing his expression into polite surprise. "What a coincidence." "Nathan." I nodded to his companion. "I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner." "Not at all," the blonde said, curiosity evident in her eyes. "I'm Claire, Mackenzie Hayes," I replied, deliberately using my maiden name. "Nathan's ex-wife." Nathan's jaw tightened, but his smile remained fixed. "Did you need something, Mackenzie?" I regarded him calmly, this man who had once seemed so powerful, so consuming. Now he looked smaller somehow, diminished. "Actually, yes," I said. "I came to thank you." Confusion flickered across his face. "Thank me?" "For telling me not to come back that night. It was the push I needed to find myself again." The carefully constructed mask slipped for just an instant, revealing the cold fury beneath. But I wasn't afraid anymore. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Nathan," I said sincerely. "I hope someday you learn that loving someone doesn't mean possessing them." I turned to Claire, who was watching our exchange with dawning comprehension. "Enjoy your dinner." As I walked back to Mia, I could feel Nathan's eyes boring into my back, but his power over me had evaporated like snow on warm pavement. By the time I reached our table, I was smiling. "What happened?" Mia demanded, leaning forward eagerly. "What did you say to him?" "I just said goodbye," I told her, picking up my wine glass again. Properly this time. Outside, snow continued to fall on Chicago, covering everything in a blank white canvas of possibilities. Inside, I raised my glass again in a private toast to the woman I'd rediscovered, stronger for having been broken, wiser for having been fooled, and finally, completely free. "To the after," I whispered. "To what comes next."
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.